Hello and welcome to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. I'm Luke Plymouth, and each episode takes a look at a different aspect of the wonderful world of amateur theatre and features an amateur theatre maker talking about their theatrical life, theatrical loves, and the times when they've died on stage. Our backstage pass holder John O'Neill will also take us behind the scenes at the Crescent Theatre, Birmingham, to discover more about what goes on into making a great amateur production. This week's episode is all about accents and dialects, and I'm going to be speaking to vocal coach Karen Kelly so we can learn a lot more about how different actors might have to learn different accents and what different processes they have to go through. So, Karen, tell us about your first love.
Well, my first love, in terms of theatre, my first love was when I got to go to the theatre in London, and that wasn't until I was in my early 20s when I moved there to work. Prior to that, I was sort of a small child enjoying performance here and there, but not in a structured way. I'd be a bit of a drama queen maybe, enjoyed dancing, that kind of thing. But there was no encouragement for any structured outlet, and also no money in those days either. I was pushed more towards sport and academia, but I think there must have been a latent drama queen inside me, wanting to get out in a way. But I never got involved, or never pushed myself to get involved because I never thought I was good enough. But I read a lot and I really loved literature. And when I moved to London, and my first big show that I saw was Les Miserables.
Nice.
In its very early days.
Good
so that's how old I am. Because Michael Ball was Marius. But that for me was pivotal in getting me into a theatre and getting me to make the connection between literature and theatre as well. I mean, obviously I knew it existed. We'd had some theatre trips at school and things like that, but it was being in London and being exposed to everything that was there that really fired me up, I suppose. I was living at the time before that in the West Country, and there wasn't a lot going on theatre-wise down there where I lived. We were a little bit out in the sticks. So, and at school, drama was taught through English. There was no specific drama departments. So London opened up the world of theatre for me, and then my big love is Shakespeare. So that was a real joy for me to be able to go to the Barbican, because that was the RSC's second home in those days. So I did 3 plays in a day kind of thing, nice. Armchair Shakespeare they used to call it, and then travelling up to Stratford as well to the home of the Bard and seeing plays up there.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So what's been the love of your theatrical life?
For me, it was Les Mis that was a pivotal moment. It opened my eyes. It spoke to me. I was emotionally invested in the whole musical. I'm not a musical theatre fan per se, but it struck me so much, that particular production, that I've not seen it again. I won't go and see it because that stays in my memory.
Wow.
Although I think I'm ready now, all this time later. But for years and years, people say, "Oh, go and see Les Mis." No, that was the performance for me that spoke to my heart.
Yeah. So tell us about the one that got away.
I can't really say that there is one that got away in that respect, because I always approached everything and had a broad view of lots of things. So I was never sort of desperate to be involved in one particular thing.
Sure.
And I had a broad spectrum of likes. I wasn't greatly involved in musical theatre, as I said, but I think I've done quite well in realising certain ambitions in terms of seeing people in the theatre as well, because sure. I prefer to watch rather than act, because again I'm more of a critic than an actor.
Sure, that's fair enough. So tell us about a time when you died on stage.
There have been a couple of moments when, sadly, I dried up.
Oh yeah, we've all had those.
But because there are such wonderful people who work at the Crescent, and there are very good actors who act here, the person I was opposite managed to, very cleverly picked it up and took it and helped me. And I don't think anybody was any the wiser at the time.
Yeah.
But it's the rabbit in the headlights look.
Sure.
When, and we were outdoors as well, which was probably a good thing because I couldn't see the whites of anybody's eyes at that point. It's not like being in a small studio.
So, as you said, the theme of this episode is all about vocal coaching and like teaching accents and dialects, and that ties into the Crescent Theatre's upcoming production of the Pitmen Painters.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got quite a lot of experience with vocal coaching. So, how did you originally get into vocal coaching and like teaching like accents and different dialects?
Okay, when I became more interested in theatre and theatricals, and when my daughter was old enough to start doing things, she was very interested in theatre and drama, and I encouraged her because I didn't have that encouragement when I was her age, and so I gave her as much opportunity as I could. And I got involved in workshops down at the RSC myself because I was doing things in the primary school where I work with the younger children, and I felt that there needed to be another outlet for these children.
Sure.
Not just, sitting and writing and writing and writing. And in order to do that well, I decided to put myself through workshops to gain knowledge, experience. And in all of these workshop experiences, some of them were a week long. I went on 2 or 3 making Shakespeare weeks down at the RSC.
Brilliant.
And it was always the voice and text section
Sure.
that really fired me up, and I was really, really passionate about, because I love the text of Shakespeare as well. So whilst we were acting, and we did have to do acting, and I did immerse myself in that, it was always the vocal side of things that interested me. But in terms of coaching accents and getting into that, I've always been, and there's more to it than this, I have to say, but I've always been a mimic of accents. So wherever I go, and my daughter is a little bit similar, we tend to absorb the accent of the place where we are. So when I was a very small child, we moved from Manchester, which is my native town, to Yorkshire. And I was only 5 at the time, but apparently, according to my mother, within about 3 weeks of being there, I was talking in a broad Leeds accent.
Wow.
But we do this now if we go over to Ireland and I start talking in an Irish accent, and we have to be very careful that we don't upset the natives.
Sure.
So I've always been interested in the way people speak, and I've always had a very good ear for sort of identifying where people come from. But there is more to it than that, and I decided at a ripe old age to apply to do a master's course at Birmingham Conservatoire, which I did. We started in 2018, but of course everybody knows what happens in 2020. So I finished it in lockdown, but successfully, and so that took me into the world of acting and vocal coaching, because the two sort of go hand in hand. My degree qualifies me to help people, not just actors, but anybody who uses their voice for, safe vocal use, healthy vocal use, as well as teaching the accents, which I do enjoy.
Yeah.
But there's more of a science to it than just having a good ear.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about that process you go through to teach people, to coach and support actors with accents and dialects?
Yeah, sure. So for each accent, wherever it is in the world, in the country, wherever, there are what we call signature sounds. So they are the particular vowel sounds that accent will make. Consonants as well, whether they are there, whether they're left out. Also in dialects, there are certain words that are used in a dialect that aren't used in other dialects. So,
Sure.
It's that sort of thing that is needed to be learned. But the importance of learning an accent is finding where in the mouth the word is created. So what are you doing with your tongue? Is it hitting the alveolar ridge? Is it between the teeth? Is it behind the teeth? Are the lips spread? Are the lips rounded? because if it's a lazy accent, then the lips aren't going to move at all. So
Sure.
a bit like a Cockney accent. If it's Welsh, then you're doing a lot of lip rounding because that's where the accent's formed. So it's about that. It's about getting the actor to feel it in their mouth as well.
Yeah, because actors often say sometimes that they can't do particular accents. So is it possible for an actor to learn any accent, with the rich coaching and exercises?
Oh, it's absolutely possible. Again, it's like I said before, it's about them listening, but more importantly about finding where to make the sound. I find it's more difficult for me to teach my Manchester accent because I do it automatically. So I have to think even harder about, well, how do I actually say that? But it's good because it makes you think, it makes you stop and think, well, actually, that's how I say that, but I'm doing it automatically. So, don't realise.
Consider that, actually. That's a good point.
Which is why it's not always a good thing to get the person who speaks in that way to teach it.
Sure.
Because I use the phonetic alphabet to break down the accent to help those actors find where that placement is for those particular sounds in their mouth. So, if it's an R sound and it is pronounced ah, there's a difference in the way that the mouth is shaped and what the tongue is doing, and it's just getting that actor to feel that and to be able to reproduce it. But it takes work on their part as well. Obviously, it's all to do with practice and
Sure.
looking at themselves in the mirror as well, instead of just listening.
Because it can be quite challenging. I mean, I can speak from personal experience, having had to learn a Geordie accent for the Pitmen Painters myself. So what do you think of the challenges that can come with the different accent or dialect learning or coaching?
Well, the challenge is, first and foremost, is that everybody has their own accent.
Yes.
Whereas I break down an accent based on standard English, and not everybody talks standard English, of course. So when I'm breaking down an accent, I have to take into account how the actor speaks before they start learning the accent, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So when we're looking at phonetics, we're looking at how it's spoken in standard English and then how it's spoken in the accent. But in between that, you've got the actor's accent as well. Yeah. So the challenge is taking it from the base of standard English and breaking it down. So you've got your base versus the new consonant analysis and vowel inventory of the accent, and applying that to how the actor that you're working with speaks themselves. Yeah. The other thing with an accent is as well that a particular sound may not always sound the same in that accent. You can't say, oh yes, in Welsh they always pronounce something this way, because it depends on intention, it depends on the emphasis, it depends on where that sound is in the word and where the word is in the sentence. Yeah. So it could sound slightly differently in the same accent, and that's the challenge, is that you can't just say, oh yes, every sound on that page is going to be like this. Yeah. Because you have to take into account those other effects, and male, female speakers, age, and expression. All those sorts of things need to be included in the whole process of learning. Absolutely.
What's been the most rewarding or challenging accent or dialect that you've worked on or supported with, or maybe used yourself in theatre?
I think this current project has been very rewarding because the Geordie accent is notoriously hard to learn, and it was a lot of work to go through and look at all the various bits, and again not come up with something that, you have to say this, you have to say that, but having that dialogue with the cast about, well, actually, what do you mean when you say that? It could come out in this way. Yeah. And I think the conversations that we've had here about the Geordie accent and the work that I've put in and the work that the actors have put in have certainly proved really fruitful.
Karen, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's been really interesting and really enjoyed speaking to you, and thank you very much for coming on.
It's been a pleasure, thank you.
This episode We're talking about the Crescent's upcoming production, the Pitmen Painters. But who were the Pitmen? Why and what did they paint? To start, let's journey back to the 1930s when our play begins, and when over 1 million men were employed in the underground coal mining industry in the UK. Villages and towns, particularly in the north-east of England, Yorkshire and Wales, had grown up around large coal mines. These mines had dramatically increased production since the 1800s and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Whole, strong communities were formed around the coal pits or collieries. The men that worked in the coal pits became known early on as pitmen. The coal mining industry was stamped onto the community's identity, their social lives, tragedies and celebrations, and even their language. Mining life was dangerous, which also became part of the community consciousness. Miners could die in accidents, pit collapses or flooding. And these towns and places still feel their legacy as pit towns, perhaps especially since the closure of so many coal pits in the 1980s. One key pit town was Ashington in Northumberland in the northeast of England, about 15 miles north of Newcastle upon Tyne. With large collieries nearby, including Woodhorn and Ellington, coal mining was a huge part of local life in Ashington. It even affected the language. Many people in Ashington and the surrounding areas spoke, and still speak, with a distinctive mine workers' accent and dialect known as Pitmatic or Yakka, which is different to the regional accents such as Geordie and Mackem, which are from Newcastle and Sunderland. You can still hear Pitmatic words like cracket, C-R-A-C-K-E-T, Marra, M-A-R-R-A, and Clarts, C-L-A-R-T-S, in their everyday language. Most of the employed working-age men living near these collieries would be working as miners. A typical day of manual labour would last 10 hours in the dark, dangerous, hot, cramped, dusty, and sometimes very wet mines. A working day would earn a miner about £2.06, which is about £120 by today's standards. Working age actually meant men and boys, of course. The typical age for boys to leave school and go and find work was about 12 or 13 years old. For many, this led to a lifelong drive for self-improvement and self-education. This is where the Workers' Educational Association, or WEA, comes in. This was an adult further education charity founded in 1903 that still exists today. It's the largest voluntary provider of adult education in the UK. It was originally founded to provide educational opportunities to the working classes. And back in 1927, it began supplying working class men in the Ashington branch with opportunities to attend further education classes on a variety of subjects. And by 1934, having been through many of the usual subjects like evolution and philosophy, the Ashington branch tried to study economics, but couldn't get hold of a tutor. They opted for another available class instead, art appreciation. The WEA found someone via Durham University, the painter and tutor Robert Leon. Imagine for a moment the life of an Ashington pitman. From the age of 13, you have been working 10 hours a day in a coal mine, and local life is all you know. You have probably never left Ashington, unless you were a soldier in the World War. Ashington has no library or art galleries, and you have probably seen very few paintings, if any. Imagine an art tutor from a university 40 miles south arrives with a projector and some black and white slides of enormous Renaissance paintings of angels and cherubs on ceilings in churches thousands of miles away, and tries to talk about art history and form. This was the challenge that faced the Ashington miners and their tutor, Robert Leon. the group were dissatisfied with the course and struggled to find a starting point with art that held any meaning to them. To find a different way of connecting them with art, Leon hit upon an idea. He got them to create their own work, and this practical approach meant he could build up their understanding of their own approach to art and connection with the material by getting them to try it themselves and discuss the process, results and so on each time, starting with printouts from lino cuts and moving on to painting. The group began their phase of learning by doing. They had more opportunities to study other eras and styles of art, including a trip to London's National Gallery, and they experimented with their own subjects and styles, and they appreciated art through practical application. Although some would embrace and create extraordinary examples of modern art, their most famous work was remarkable at the time for depicting life as they saw it. Everyday working class life. Life in the working men's clubs, living room windows, terrier dogs, and of course life in the coal pits. These paintings remain a vivid example from this area and era for the North East and the rest of the world. The terms of the Union and WEA meant the Ashington Group couldn't make their money from their paintings as part of the WEA class. But as they developed and started to exhibit locally, they began to receive interest and offers from experts and buyers. The group and their work became celebrated in the British art world of the 1930s and 40s, even though most of them had never had any formal artistic training, besides what they learned from Robert Leon and as part of the group. Though some of them would receive offers from patrons to work independently, they formally set themselves up as a working collective, the Ashington Group. They met regularly between 1934 and 1983 to encourage their own progress, although most of them continued to work down the mines every day of their working lives. The play's author, Lee Hall, talks in his introduction to the play about how art is for everyone and how society becomes richer for everyone when art and culture, including painting and theatre, are opened up to all as they should be. The Pitmen Painters is partly Lee Hall's testament to a time when working class men were given the opportunity to learn, make and share art. They took the opportunity with both hands and enriched the art world with it. It is partly a lament for the community of the northern pit towns, many of whom are now struggling with identity and unemployment, now all the working coal mines are closed. And it is partly a lament for what Hall sees as an arts world that is no longer as open as it might have been to everyone, no matter their means or background. The Ashington Group Trust still maintains a gallery of their paintings in Ashington that you can visit today. All the paintings depicted in the play of their experiences, Lee Hall's The Pitmen Painters, are examples of their own work, and fees go towards maintaining the collection. Ashington, at last, has its own gallery, a monument to art created by the working classes. Maybe pay them a visit, or support a local gallery. Maybe you might even pick up a brush yourself, just to see what happens. As one of our Pitmen painters, Oliver Kilbourne, would say, just paint. I'm here sat opposite two Pitmen painters, Damien Dickens and Brian Wilson. Hello both.
Hi John, you're right.
Thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
Pitmen Painters brings to life the unusual real-life story of a group of coal miners and a dental mechanic who, in 1934, hired a professor from Newcastle University to teach an art appreciation evening class. The play takes us from amusing first dabbles with paintbrushes to the group being recognised and even lauded in the art world. It's a moving piece that celebrates the very notion of community and working class spirit and allows us to embrace the energy, ideas and tensions that emerge from this unlikely artistic journey. It runs from the 14th to the 21st of May in the Crescent Theatre's Ron Barber studio. Damien, let's start with you.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little about your character, the setting of the play, and the steps you've taken to make the setting believable and authentic?
Yeah, I play Jimmy Floyd, one of the miners. He's a real person, so he was a real miner. We all play real people. They're all based on real people.
And have you looked into these people? Have you researched them?
I think we all have in our own way, yeah. We watched a video when we first started looking at them, and it was a bit of history on who they were, where they were from, what kind of paintings they did. I think Mike went up to see the paintings, didn't he? The paintings they did are in a kind of museum in Ashington.
Right.
So we'd all like to go, I think, at some point, but it's very far. Northumberland.
What did Mike say? Well, who's Mike playing?
Mike plays Harry Wilson.
Right.
Yeah. He loved it. Yeah. He said it was great. I think the thing that we all kind of connect with and think is extraordinary is the fact that they were all a group of miners from the same area who painted without any training, and they were good as well. You look at them and they're really good. It's quite extraordinary group of people.
And the paintings are a real part of the staging, which I know we've got a question on later, but tell us about how the paintings are integrated with the staging.
So you won't see the paintings on stage, but you'll see them as projections behind. So when we're talking about them, because we move sometimes from one to another, and the audience will see them behind, but we've got easels and we've got things on them that represent them, so we kind of know what we're working with.
So the play sort of intermingles with the real life, the real history.
Yeah,
by
definitely.
having those paintings projected.
You'll be able to still see actual paintings done by the actual group, because the group was huge. There's only 4 or 5 of us on the actual stage, but there was more. There was much more in real life. Yeah.
So it's been boiled down for dramatic purposes into this cast of about 6 men, is it?
Yeah, there's 5. You've got 5 miners. Except Harry, who's a dental mechanic. Then you've got the professor, Robert Lyon, who comes in. He's the sort of group's tutor. They hire him to teach them about art appreciation. Yeah. And then you've got a couple of other characters as well, Miss Sutherland and Susan Parks, who's a life model.
And this was set in a community in the 1930s.
Yes.
A coal mining community in a very distinct part of the world. So, for example, in terms of the dialect, how are you finding that, and how are you bringing that to life?
Do you want to say that one?
Well, we've got our very good tutor in Karen Kelly,
right,
who I've worked with before on, well, you did as well, on Hobson's Choice. We're doing Salford accents then. She's given us lots of material, written material, stuff we can actually hear, links to various sites that we can actually hear the dialect. What she did tell us, though, that there are loads of different dialects in the northeast. I mean, we just think of it as Geordie, but people in Ashington would speak different from people in Newcastle, from Sunderland, from Hartlepool, from whatever. So what accent we're actually achieving, I don't know, but...
And have you had to spend quite a lot of time trying to get that accent right, like the vowel sounds and all of that? Because the Newcastle accent is a tough accent, and this is sort of an offset of that, isn't it? Although they would say it's not, it's its own thing. Yeah. So
I think I've got quite a strong Brummie accent, so I've almost had to kind of try and unlearn that to learn the Ashington. Yeah. And it's not easy, and I still think I've got a few bits to work on.
And can you give us a line of Ashington?
Oh God, Luke, nobody is doing any painting in this art class.
Yours is good, Matt. You've had it like nailed from day one, really. Yes, you have.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I would be terrified of doing an entire play in Pitmen, which is
it's the challenge, really. That's part of why I wanted to do it. Yeah. Really, you got to try and push yourselves.
I mean, some words are easy. You can easily adapt them, and they sound Geordie. But there are quite a lot of common words that you think, oh, that sounds just ordinary. Yeah. And it's just the fact that you've got a lot of words to talk about, you know.
To be honest, Lee Hall helps you in a way, because he's written certain words in the way that you should say, so you already know. But sometimes there's certain contradictions, like it might say Doon and then later on down, for instance. Oh, I see. So you have to kind of navigate.
And there's one, I've read the play this week in preparation, and there's one line, Divint.
Divint now.
They say Divint. Yeah. What does that mean?
I don't know. I didn't know.
Didn't know.
Yeah. Fascinating.
What would you know?
Yeah. And Brian, coming to you,
Yeah.
you're playing George. What does this character bring to the piece, and how does it contrast with Jimmy? Because you're quite different people.
Oh yes, very different. George is cantankerous. I think that's the word to use. And he doesn't care what he says, and he doesn't care who it upsets. He's the rep, the union rep for the mine, but more importantly for the play, he's also the representative for the official representative for the WEA, which is the Workers' Educational Association, which was formed in 1903 specifically to have adult education for people who'd left school early. So a lot of the working class, obviously, kids left school early so they could earn money to put into the family coffers.
Because they were down the mine at the age of 13, weren't they?
Yeah.
12, 13.
Well, 10, some of them.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
Jimmy has this one long speech where he explains how he started, very emotional, sort of, which Damien does wonderfully. Yeah, I mean, that's the point. I mean, the WA is still going. I mean, it's a voluntary sector organisation, which is specific. I think it's the biggest one in the country that looks at adult education.
Yeah, that's right.
But because of that, George is very much into the rules and regulations and is a stickler for sticking to the procedures, and woe betide anybody who dares to go outside the procedures, and he gives them a tongue lashing if they actually do something that's not in the correct procedures. So he also has a feisty relationship with a couple of the characters. The one character we haven't mentioned is the young lad, who is called Young Lad. He hasn't got a name, but he's actually George's nephew.
Right.
But he's unemployed, he's on the dole, and George thinks he's skiving and keeps reminding him that he's not got a job, and he keeps getting at him, why haven't you got a job? We can see why you haven't got a job, and it leads to certain consequences later in the play, which I shan't reveal.
But your character, George, which is this sort of, he's an overly formal voice, isn't he, at times, is in stark contrast to Jimmy, who just never follows instructions, does he?
No, I think sometimes he doesn't understand the instructions, so that's almost half the battle with Jimmy. He's not the brightest button in the shop.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
George has a line, we're not thick enough, well, apart from Jimmy.
Yeah, just to establish that straight from the off. Yeah.
And does Jimmy agree with that?
Well, obviously not. No, he considers himself. I think he knows He does say a bit later on. I know I'm a bit stupid, so he knows he's never going to be the smartest in the room. But I think he just struggles to understand and grasp certain elements, especially when we're talking about the art. And I think all the lads are on the same page at the start. They don't understand why do we have to know the meaning of this and the meaning of that. But I think by the end, it's still sort of Jimmy who's struggling to get to grips with it. He has more knowledge. He knows more about it because he's read up on it and people have told him stuff. But he doesn't understand it quite as well as the others when they discuss it.
And that leads us perfectly on to our third question, which is about character progression, basically. So the play starts with all the pitmen being totally new to art and painting, but there is real character progression as it goes on. And you've already told us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure Jimmy really progresses much other than that, to be honest. He's still... He's not one-dimensional. Like, he was a real person. I don't know if the real Jimmy Floyd was as,
But the fact that Jimmy doesn't progress is perhaps a counterpoint and makes it more obvious that the others really do progress. Because the first time these blokes have their art class, they don't know what's going on. They're not really comfortable with it. But then we see them just a few scenes later, and they are describing art in completely different ways. And I just wonder how you'd approach that as an actor.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that, as you said at the beginning, there's no connection between the tutor and the group. There's no way that they come together until he suggests, well, why don't you do it yourself? And as the play goes on, the tutor sort of withdraws from the lessons, and it's just amongst the five of them discussing the meaning of what they've done and the meaning of other stuff, and they go to galleries and they start talking about things like that. I mean, and it's not just art, because by the end of the the play, my character talks about Shakespeare and Goethe, and gives a definition of an allegory. So it's not just confined to art. So yeah, I mean, I think Jimmy does progress, but perhaps not as far as.
Well, yeah, in his own way. Yeah, I think he likes to be involved with the debates, and it's organic, but he asks a lot of questions. He doesn't quite. I think he just doesn't quite truly understand certain bit. Every time you think he sort of gets there, there's something else that he's got to learn, and he's got to get his head round.
But he absolutely does stay involved, and
of course, yeah.
He absolutely bounces around in the conversation as much as the other guys. And ironically, it's his work that gets recognised half the time.
Yeah. I mean, he's got every right to. I was thinking about it the other day. I think that there's something to be said for the kind of high end art that not everyone understands. I mean, show me a triangle, it's a triangle, or a circle and a square,
Rectangle.
And it is what it is, and it's that kind of surface level, but that still doesn't make it not art.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. It's
exactly.
Still there's still a place for it in the world. There's still it still needs to be done.
And the play is a lot about that. In the play is the art is what you want it to be, and whatever you read of it in your mind, and it's not about some fancy description, in some fancy university. And I think that's a lot of the point of the piece, isn't it? Which does lead us on to our next question. There are plenty of ideas, debate and thought in the play. At one point, Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, however you want to say it, is quoted as saying, "I don't paint pictures, I paint experience." How have you connected with the experiences the playwright has written about, and what ideas have connected with you, either of you, in the rehearsal room?
Well, I mean, you see the pictures that they've painted. I mean, they are of a high standard. From me, I mean, me who actually enjoyed the fact that sometimes I actually got a D in art. That was the highest I ever got in art. I mean, the detail is fantastic, and I mean, George isn't particularly well known, I don't think, for his paintings. But I mean, the one I've seen, it's amazing, considering they're totally untutored. But how it affects me, I don't know, because I must admit I'm a bit of a Philistine with regard to art and sculpture. I mean, I can't remember the last time I went to an art gallery.
But the ideas in the piece go beyond just art, don't they?
I relate it more to
arts.
theatre. Yeah. A lot of the discussion in debate, I always think back to theatre and my own background and where I was from, and I guess what I understood, and kind of finding my own sort of rhythm and what I want to do with it as well, what I enjoy most and what I want to.
A big part of the piece is you put art to one side. A lot of it's about class and socialism and capitalism.
And it's about the accessibility of the arts to people other than the rich.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite because Lee Hall is a socialist, and this runs through the whole of the play. That it's the art should be available to the whole of the population, not just the ones who can afford it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the way that is brought home in the play is this lady turns up, doesn't she, in the first act? She's heard word of this group from Leon, or Lion, whatever his name is, the tutor.
Mr. Lion?
Oh yeah, okay, Lion. I can't do it. I'm not going to try.
Don't embarrass yourself.
And she's from moneyed class. And so that, I suppose, is it's a device to bring it home to the audience, to spark the debate and to show what that difference is.
Yeah, when she comes in immediately, there's a change in the group and a change with the status and everything. And
then of course she tries to take one of the miners, Oliver, who we haven't actually mentioned, under her wing, and offers him regular money, to give up his job in the pit. And that's another strand of the play. Will he give up the life that he knows to go into the unknown and just spend his life painting?
There's a lot of discussion around that.
Yeah. So you've got the collectivist nature of these group of miners who work and do leisure together, paint together, versus this person who's coming in and saying, I'm going to bung you a load of money and change your life that way.
It's kind of that working class ideal of you have to have a job. You have to have a steady, secure job. You have to pay, a good, honest wage. And you take that away, or you try and do something else. I think when the lads are discussing it, they're like, well, what if she changes her mind? What if she hasn't got the money anymore? Whereas mining is as dangerous as it is. It's still, at the time, it was still a job that needed to be done.
Stick to what you know, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're both heading into rehearsals now. It's a fortnight, roughly, till your opening night. What will you be rehearsing today, and how is the piece shaping up?
So we're doing a full run through tonight.
And how are your runs going? Are you booked down? Are you getting through them?
We've been booked down, I think, mostly for a while. Just muddling through. Still a lot of prompts needed for all of us, to be honest.
And picking up cues is the other thing. Because there's a lot of dialogue which is quite similar from scene to scene, and you think, which scene am I in now? So it's...
It definitely relies on the pace as well. Because it's quite funny. It's quite a funny piece, and the jokes come thick and fast.
It's obviously got this very serious strands to it. But I read it before I auditioned. I thought, this is not a bad play. Nice parts, vaguely amusing. Started doing it on. Actually, it was hilarious. There are parts that are really funny, particularly in the first act. Second act it gets a bit more serious.
But that's why you have to be on the cues. You have to be on top of it, because otherwise you sort of lose it. Then
you lose that timing. Yeah. And finally, regular listeners to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast will know that we like to enrich the palette of our guests' lives by immersing them in the finer brush strokes of trivia. And you two are no exception. So, may I present to you Yakka or Crapper, a Pitmatic dialect trivia quiz. Pitmatic, which we have talked about a little bit, colloquially known as Yakka, is an English dialect spoken in the Northumberland and Durham coalfield areas of England, which includes the Ashington area, where this play is set. I'm going to give you a Yakka dialect word or phrase, and then a possible meaning, and you have to tell me if the meaning is Yakka, which means it's true, or Crapper, which means it's not true. The first one is going to go to Brian. Baigi. I'm going to spell it for you because my Pitmanic accent is non-existent. Is Baigie. Baigi. A plastic bag. Is that Yakka or Crapper?
We'll go for Crapper.
Correct.
Oh, one on the board.
Baigi is a turnip or swede. Damien, are you ready?
Ready.
This is your first question. Chum is blank, as in his face was chum. Is that Yakka or Crapper?
I'm going to say, John, that's Yakka.
That's Crapper, I'm afraid. The real meaning of chum is empty. So you would say, collect up the chum glasses.
Yeah, but you said blank, which is sort of kind of empty. You know what I mean? I think I should get that.
Well, I can see what you're saying.
I think that's
a
a
close
false
meaning.
No, he's done me over there.
But the geniuses that wrote this quiz probably did that deliberately just to catch.
Don't like that. No,
somebody
I'm considered. We're even 1-1.
Question 2 for you, Brian, is croggy, which is Croggie, and it is a ride on a bike's handlebars, as in, give us a croggy home. Is that Yakka or Crapper?
Oh, we'll go for Yakka on that one.
Correct.
Oh,
that's
ding,
two
ding, ding,
in
ding,
a row. Right, Damien, this is your chance to make some kind of fight.
Well, it's
back.
2-1, so we'll see what.
You ready?
2-1.
2-1.
I'd say 2-0, but it's all right. We can all have our own opinions. Femmer is weak, spindly, or fragile. That's Femmer. Femmer. Is that Yakka or Crapper?
Can you use it in a sentence?
I can't because there's not one written down.
Just trying to play with you, to be honest. Let's go Yakka. Go on.
Correct. You're in the game.
I'm still in the game.
You
2-2,
can win. You
play
can
for.
win it. Brian, this is for you to win. Actually, if you get this, you have won.
What be disputed?
The word is Joogle, Joogle. And the meaning is dance, as in, do you fancy a joogle? Is that yakka or crapper?
Well, we go for crapper.
Correct. 3 out of 3. Now, just as a consolation prize, Damien.
Where's the ombudsman? Who do I speak to complain about this?
I suppose it will have to be the chairman.
Cool.
You have to write to the chairman.
Write a stronger word.
You're to redeem yourself and get your second point. This is your final question. Pelched, which means stolen, as in he's pelched that, it's not his. Is that yakka or crapper?
Yakka.
I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not. It means pelched, Pelched, means tired or out of breath, as in, I need a rest, I'm pelched. And Damien, I imagine after this, you're pelched.
No, I'm off for a joogle.
Okay. Don't know what joogle means. I'm confused.
Can't remember.
Well, thank you both. It's been a wonderful interview, and I shall be there, and I hope as many of our listeners as possible will come to see the Pitmen Painters, which is from the 14th to the 21st of May in the Ron Barber studio. Thank you very much both.
Lovely. Cheers,
Thank
John.
you.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, make sure you subscribe at podcast.crescent-theatre.co.uk or via Spotify or Apple Podcasts to get the next episode. You can find out more about the Crescent Theatre Birmingham and our upcoming productions, including the Pitmen Painters, by visiting www.crescent-theatre.co.uk or by following us on social media.
Amateur of Life and Death is a Crescent Theatre production. It is researched and presented by John O'Neill and Luke Plimmer, with research by Laura East. The music is by Brendan Stanley. The podcast is edited by Kevin Middleton.